Mr. Zuckerberg, I remember well your first visit to Capitol Hill back in 2010. You spoke to the Senate Republican High-Tech Task Force, which I chair. You said back then that Facebook would always be free. Is that still your objective?
Senator, yes. There will always be a version of Facebook that is free.
Well, if so, how do you sustain a business model in which users don't pay for your service?
Senator, we run ads.
What you just witnessed is a United States Senator by the name of Orrin Hatch asking Mark Zuckerberg how Facebook makes money. Now, in this modern age of social media monetization and data privacy shenanigans, it is obvious to the average 8-year-old that a company like Facebook doesn't sell its website to its users, it sells its users to advertisers. In Hatch's defense, he was born when Adolf Hitler ruled the Third Reich and kids had to bust out the Victrola to listen to the latest tunes. So of course he doesn't know too much about technology.
Now from the top, make it drop, that's some wet ass pussy.
Luckily, Mr. Hatch finally retired after 42 years in the Senate, but a lot of people like him are still in Congress. The average age of US senators is well over 60 years old, and representatives are not much younger, which means most of them probably have trouble using their jitterbugs. So how the frick are these geriatrics supposed to grapple with complex issues of data privacy, climate change, and other science stuff? Well, what if there was a service, an office in Congress, dedicated to senators and representatives whose sole purpose was to figure out the uses and implications of technology and help those people understand it before they make huge decisions about how technology is used? Turns out there actually was an office in Congress exactly like this. It was called the Office of Technology Assessment, and it existed from 1972 until 1995. Now you might be wondering, well, technology didn't cease to exist in 1995, and in fact it actually became a much more important and sometimes frightening part of everyday life than it was in the 70s, so why the F did Congress get rid of it? The answer, of course, comes in the form of this lovely teddy bear of a man, Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich led the vanguard of a conservative mini-revolution in 1994 called the Contract with America, in which the Republican Party took both houses of Congress in a desperate and fairly successful attempt to undermine everything President Bill Clinton tried to do. As Speaker of the House of Representatives, Gingrich wielded extraordinary power and was able to effectively eliminate various offices, including the OTA. His reasoning? The OTA was a waste of taxpayer money, and if Congress people needed science advice, they could just go around asking random science experts, right?
As people understand what is in the contract, I think they will begin to reject it.
In my view, it is not a good idea to go into a contract like what was organized by the Republican Party in Washington, laying out a whole series of things which the party said, these are the things we're going to do.
As a side note, the OTA's annual budget peaked at $33.4 million, adjusted for inflation, whereas the U.S. military's budget in 2019 was $732 billion in taxpayer dollars, a difference of a factor of 21,916. But the military-industrial complex is a subject for another video. You see, the politicization of science has become starkly obvious in today's climate change/pandemic situation, but a close look reveals that this was happening for at least a few decades before now. Back in the 1980s, the OTA first attracted conservative ire when it published reports criticizing President Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, also known as Star Wars. Here's what Carl Sagan, a smart person, said about Star Wars.
If we were so foolish as to go ahead with it, I think the net result would be, after the expenditure of $1 million, that we would be far less safe than we are today.
But Republicans really wanted those giant space lasers and interpreted any critique of them as an assault on freedom itself. Meanwhile, this conservative hack called Donald Lambro published a book called Fat City, which basically blamed the OTA for all of America's problems. The office lasted until 1995, after the GOP takeover of Congress, and in those 23 years of existence it published about 750 reports on a myriad of topics, which are largely even more relevant today than they were then. Climate change, health insurance, world hunger, infectious diseases, etc. Congresspeople such as Rush Holt, Bill Foster, and Tim Ryan have tried to revive the OTA, but funding has never been passed. Why? Because science is a liberal conspiracy. And with the GOP in control of the Senate, the chances of reviving the OTA as it was are slim to none. But wait, there's an epilogue to this story. While funding a bicameral OTA is out of the question, it just so happens that the Democrat-led House of Representatives can indubitably create a unicameral version of the OTA without involving the Senate. As recently as just last month, the great Ralph Nader wrote an open letter to Nancy Pelosi asking her to do so. But she has not. Which begs the question, are the Democrats really any different from the Republicans?